Hey guys, I'm here with Hugh Newman and Jim Vieira. They are authors and researchers. They're interested in like awesome stuff, like particularly right now what we're going to talk about primarily besides megalith stuff, which we love, we're going to talk about giants. So they wrote a book together about like the American giants, and then they just wrote one that they just finished about Stonehenge giants, and then you're working on a worldwide giant one eventually. Is that correct?
Eventually, yeah, we'll get to
Eventually.
that.
Okay. But for now, we're on the Stonehenge giants. So like that's so welcome guys. Hi.
Hi.
Hello, nice to be on, and I appreciate your enthusiasm for the subjects that we're into, like obsessive lunatics.
No, it's like why watch TV, right? I mean, it's the greatest mystery unsolved in the world. It's awesome stuff. Okay, so you don't have to convince me that giants are real. All right, let's just get into this. What's y'all's methodology for deciding whether an account is like credible or not? When you're deciding, like, okay, like we can add this one in our research.
Uh, I could go first. Oddly enough, about 2 days ago, a woman who's a fact checker for USA Today wrote an article about a find in the late 1890s in at the Sayre Mound in Pennsylvania, right? So W.K. Moorhead, A.B. Skinner, both noted archaeologists. The report in the New York Times says they unearthed over 7-foot skeletons with horns. And that it's making the rounds on the internet for years. And they get this weird picture of like a horned skull and saying, connecting it to the story. So she does her best of fact checking it and kind of debunking it. But in fact, I sent her a copy of our book, and in our book, we dug into the account. We found that A.B. Skinner, in fact, wrote an editorial to the New York Times where he said the skeletons were normal sized and there were deer antlers at the head of the burials. And one of the reporters yelled, "Oh, they have horns." So it made it, and it got mistranslated. And so I cued her into that. But so we go through, we go before the story, after the story, check uh, the editorial pages, the records. We talk to family members or descendants, universities, Carnegie, Smithsonian, whatever we can glean about the reports. And we don't just because there's so much bullshit out there, and there's a lot of valid and strange things in the historical record, but there's also a lot of erroneous information that's false. And so we're pretty diligent about diving in and going through every step we can to get to the root of the story.
It is one of the issues. I mean, you'll see in the latest book on Stonehenge in Britain that Jim went well into this Irish giant, for instance. I mean, that's just one example. And for years, we've been presenting and putting this image of, specific accounts up that we haven't really researched that much, but there's enough information to verify them. But Jim went deep into the research, found out all these archives, and we completely debunked really famous accounts, and a lot of people are quite surprised. They kind of assume we're just kind of believers, we just want to believe we're giantologists and all this kind of stuff, but actually we're quite kind of surprisingly level-headed. We might not appear that way, but we are, and we kind of like we want to want to know the truth because it's such a strange story,
Oh, there's enough.
especially.
There's
Yeah.
enough factual stuff that you don't have to rely on.
Yeah. I mean, there's just so much data. I mean, in America, it's insane. I mean, I couldn't believe what Jim and I and Ross Hamilton and Micah Ewers and other researchers were coming up with back like 6, 7 years ago. We just and more since our book came out. There's been like something like I think I've noted about 300 or 400 more accounts people have found as well, on top of the 1,500 that we were aware of, and that's just North America. And so, yeah, in England and Britain, it's not so much. Is that we've got like a few hundred, but you compare the size of Britain compared to America, it is actually quite close if you compare the land masses and things like that. So it's just a strange subject. I mean, people still think I'm completely mad for even talking about giants, but when you get so many accounts unfolding as you're researching other things like megaliths and the mysteries of ancient sites, then you got to kind of take it quite seriously and have a good look at it. I think people don't realize that they think we're just gone a bit mad or something.
yeah. I'll jump in and say you have so many ancient sites that the legends are associated with giants. You know, whether it's Vieira in Peru or Stonehenge or Nan Madol, and then you have historical accounts from credible sources like the American Geographical Society or member of Parliament from England talking about and witnessing the unearthing of absolutely giant bones. And I understand that that there's people who are skeptical about it because we haven't DNA tested a 10 and 12-foot skeleton, although we've made a very strong case through the records and the research and documentation of known anthropologists in the US of well over 7-foot skeletons found and cataloged by numerous university digs, that there is a story here. There's no question about it. And but it could be a much vaster story, and there's no peer review in the alternative world. So you can get away with things you can't in academia, unfortunately. So Hugh and I try to take a rigorous approach and look at both sides of these issues. And after all these years, I just fell into this. I was never like the giant guy. I just, by a twist of fate and a tangential investigation, I fell into this whole strange idea. So, the moral of the story is like virtually every megalithic site on the planet has a giant account and a giant legend associated with it. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, okay. So do you think that they I mean that leads into like what degree do you think that they had a hand in building the megalithic sites? Because like even if we're just talking about, you know, they're even if they're twice as big as a regular human, okay? That still isn't going to account for the just their size alone isn't going to do what they did. They had to have advanced technology.
I'll jump in quickly. Like, yeah, I think that's kind of the simplistic notion. Oh, this 20-foot guy built this site. It's not like that. It's that giants are associated with like the tall ones and lost continents and survivors who share the tools and the arts of civilization in an ancient megalithic science based on geometry and geomantics and ley lines and things like that. That's one of the most fascinating aspects that we uncovered in our book. There's all this other information about the tall ones, if you will, or it's like a shamanic elite or druidic elite in the British Isles. So I would say it's a matter of technology, not some big oaf picking up a stone and putting it on top of another one.
Which
There's a bit more
Yeah.
to it than that, though. There is an element of giants. I mean, there are some legends, quite a few, of where they talk about these giants actually lifting the stones or dropping them as they walk across the landscape, like it falls out of his shoe and lands, and that creates the site. Or you've got the apron full of the giantess mythos in Britain. That's something me and JJ have looked deeply into, where this giantess goddess type figure she starts her journey with these megaliths, these stones in an apron, and she's got a direction, a final place she's supposed to get to, and on the way she trips or her apron strings break and the stones fall down and create a stone circle and things like this. So although they're not actually, doesn't account for kind of them actually building it, they're connected with the construction of it. So like Jim says, there is this element of like they were the designers, they were the kind of surveyors, they were the architects, they were the kind of overseers of these sites, as well as possibly getting the biggest guys in to come and help move some of the stones. But I think there is an element of that where if you look at the ratio of height to strength, it's quite remarkable how much strength increases when you just gradually get taller, even not that much taller, if you've got the same ratios and the same kind of body kind of size expanding in the same way, the strength levels get really, really high. And so, I know that,
but
we're not
still,
saying
you're not
giants
going to
just
build
built them like
Baalbek
that.
or something.
That's to everything. But some of them, yeah.
Oh, sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah.
I was gonna say you're
Yeah,
still not gonna build like
exactly.
something like
That's
Baalbek.
that's a different level altogether. Baalbek. I mean,
Oh,
But
sure, absolutely. Yeah. That's a different story.
okay, so but then it's almost like something happens in the duration of when from when the legend of them existed till, I mean, there's accounts that aren't even like the Lovelock Caves or something, like, where they would exist in the 1800s kind of thing. or I mean, if you want to even go to Afghanistan accounts, but let's just say like the Lovelock Cave thing, and then they become kind of like cannibalistic, stupid. Like they go from being extremely smart to being like where they aren't very smart when they're the further they go in time. Is
Well,
that
this
true?
well, there's two different stories. There's the kind of biblical, cannibalistic, marauding giants that Native American legends talk about, and then there is the legends of the tall ones, the Tuatha De Danann, or
Mhm.
different beings who show up, the shining ones that are have elongated skulls oftentimes, and they teach the arts of civilization. So it's kind of uh, a coexisting reality with these two different types of giant that are talked about in mythology. And then you have survivors after a great flood once again. So you have a population that's reduced. But in the Bible, there's like 23 mentions of giants, the Rephaim and the Nephilim, and Moses sends scouts out, and we were grasshoppers in this site. And the giant of Gath has 6 fingers and toes. And the entire world is littered with rock art with hands and feet that are huge with 6 fingers and 6 toes. So uh, it's kind of both. You hear both stories. Like Viracocha and the malevolent giants, he destroys in a flood after he creates them. So you have genetic engineers that's what a lot of these stories about. People are looking in the record, like, is it Denisovans? Is it other human cousins? That may be part of the story, but if you listen to the traditions, it's like a genetic intervention that Homo sapiens was supposed to be created by these gods and the giants as well. And so it's a really, I understand it's tough for an academic to swallow, but it appears if you listen to legends that there is a genetic connection, a genetic engineering that had taken place in the past.
Well, Hugh, I heard you say something about which was a really good point that I really didn't think about, but about how the reason that one of the main questions everybody probably asks you that I've heard is, well, where are the bones? Like, where's the evidence? Where's all that stuff? And you said something to the effect that a lot of these, it's not like they were mummified like in Egypt or something. A lot of them, whenever they're found, they kind of dissolve too naturally. Like they don't actually, they weren't well preserved. Is that also a thing?
Some of them are said to crumble to dust, as soon as they're exposed to the air. And we get that a lot actually in America and in Britain. A large amount of accounts. I mean, there are a few actually you can see in Britain. There's 3 or 4 that you can see some of the bones. You can see I think 2 7-foot skeletons, 1 7'4", I think, on display at a castle, and there's this private museum, and then there's a couple of bones here and there. So they are about, but generally, yeah, I mean, it's really hard to find them. I mean, in America, it's completely illegal anyway. You can't even have access to them. They disappeared, the whole lot of them, in 1990, because of NAGPRA, the Native American Grace Protection and Repatriation Act. The Smithsonian did quite a lot of disappearing before that, but in Britain, we do find that, like, lots and lots of accounts where they somehow they bury them in a certain way, so it's kind of preserved them, but as soon as the oxygen and the air gets near them, they literally crumble. It doesn't often just the teeth or skull fragments or some of the harder parts of the bone survive. And this is reported. I mean, and we've got, like, with the one, there's a couple around near Stonehenge, but one of the most famous ones. I just wanted to mention this because this one just vanished. No one knows what's happened to it, basically. But there was a 14-foot, 10-inch skeleton found just south of Stonehenge, near Salisbury, at a place called Ivy Church Priory, and it was witnessed by Sir Thomas Eliot. He was a member of Parliament for Cambridge. He wrote the dictionary of all books, and he wrote, he was like a scholar. He was well respected. Also John Leland, who wrote numerous famous books back in the early 1500s, and William Camden, who wrote Britannica, the whole series of Britannica, that quite Britannia it was called back there. They all witnessed this and talked about it. It was talked about for like 200 years. With that, they actually found artifacts as well. They actually found this book with these strange inscriptions all over it on the cover. They found this huge metal, tin and lead disc that had these strange inscriptions. No one could understand what they said. They've all vanished as well. So whether they crumble to dust, we don't know. But when things just seem to disappear, and it's quite unfortunate. But yeah, you do get accounts where they kind of like just literally, as soon as they're exposed, they do crumble to dust.
I'll say the Smithsonian's own accounts, their ethnologists found many huge skeletons, including a 36-inch skull found in Alton, Illinois, but listed by one of the archaeologists. I think it's the 44th annual report, 1873, and T.W. Perrin is the
Oh,
archaeologist.
that's impressive.
Yeah, I'm like the Rain Man. I can't take care of my basic needs, but I can remember all this shit. So it crumbles to dust. I wanted to throw in for, a skeptic might push this all away, and I would say it's in the reports of noted archaeologists and anthropologists for like a 200-year period. The jawbone fitting over the face with like hand room to spare, and you can put your fingers through it, is found all over the United States, buried in all kinds of reports. Don Dragoo, head of the Carnegie Anthropology Department in the 50s, and Webb and Snow, head of anthropology department at the University of Kentucky. They conducted digs. They found over 7-foot skeletons, but they noted how the Adena people had absolutely massive jaws and bone structure. So you're talking about like 7-foot 5-inch NFL linebackers, like well out of normal range, not a skinny NBA guy, and like a population of these people that seem to be like a royal class, if you will. And then you go over to the British Isles, and Hugh and I found the same thing. So many accounts of the jawbone fitting over the face of the biggest laborer there or the biggest person in town, the same kind of reports, in an era of inefficient communication, buried obscurely in these journals and archaeological reports. There's no way it's a hoax. It defies logic. So I will listen to the skeptic where like, show me the 10-foot skeleton, I'll believe. But if somebody's just dismissing this, like you guys are like hucksters or snake oilers, they can fuck right off, because there's just a mountain of evidence for this phenomena.
So then, do you think that okay, because like I love going here, but I mean like do you think there's an intentional cover up then? And if there is, why?
I would say, you know, people conflate like the CIA drug running and political assassinations and all the fucked up stuff like shadowy government agencies do with the academic and scientific world. And most academics are just going about their business. They're not involved in some, just think of the logistics of it, how improbable it is, and how it's like QAnon shit. You get into this realm of fantasy because you don't want to like debate your point. So I'll say that. But that being said, the Smithsonian was led by a racist, zealous piece of shit named Dr. Hrdlicka, who ran it with an iron fist like 50 years. And even though his own scientists listed, several dozen massive skeletons that they found, he's the one who said giants are no more, and he pushed it away as hoaxes and didn't really address what his own scientists and other anthropologists found. So you could have this kind of like, this is a religious idea, this is like a mythological idea, let's not really focus on this, or just like basically the obfuscation of evidence. I don't put that past, but you can't like share that idea with like all these scientists and anthropologists and archaeologists. That's where it goes too far for me.
Okay. And do you think it's a cover up, Hugh, or you just kind of like, eh?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Jim. I mean, we battled through the Smithsonian Files chapter a few years ago, but there's a sequence of, just to add to what Jim said, there's like a sequence of agendas that kind of overlapped and became a cover up because of these agendas. I think when you've got, at the time in the 1800s, they were pushing through the whole, especially the Smithsonian, they were pushing through the theory of evolution, Darwin's theory and all this kind of stuff. That doesn't fit if you're finding 10-foot powerful skeletons with these giant, geometrically perfectly astronomically aligned earthworks. It doesn't fit with that timeline of progression and things like this. Plus you've got the manifest destiny agenda, which is like, taking over the land with a superior race. We're coming in, taking over. We're going to push all these Native Americans. The people coming in at the time saw them as savages, which is ridiculous. It's racist. It's just abysmal the way they kind of dealt with this. And and they wanted them. They were measuring skulls and things like this to prove that they were smarter than the natives of the lands of North America and other areas they were going to. And the problem is, they were doing that with the, thinking they were the superior race, but actually they kept finding these skulls, these amazing artifacts, these giant earthworks, geometrically aligned, powerful jaws and double rows of teeth and things like this, these warriors, all these stories and legends that they were hearing as well. And so that didn't fit with what they wanted, what they were pushing for. So it forced them to kind of cover it up because they wanted their agenda. They wanted the land. They wanted to take over. They wanted to rule this part of the world. So you've got that kind of thing you're dealing with as well, where you've got these kind of basically a whole civilization of morons coming in and trying to take over from these very smart, very elite, very sophisticated, very spiritual and very quiet people, and who have never really faced anything like this before. So you could see why there was it appeared like a cover-up. It just didn't fit with the theories.
That's a good point. Yeah,
that is a good point. And now I feel like you have like Dragon Man, or is it called the China guy that won
Dragon Man
last year? And he's a Denisovan, or that's what they're saying. So I guess they'll probably, which is fine. Yeah, I'm sure it's different DNA than ours, but so I think it'll end up being, maybe it'll be accepted in the realm of, okay, and if anything's found in the future, it was a cousin to us or something.
Well, yeah, I'll say that, they found hobbits in Indonesia in 2003. They found Denisovans in 2010, massive teeth, now extremely large skull that was found in China in 2018. I will go to the other side, and my critique of academia is, there's a paradigm that it's not like, because alternative researchers take it way too far, sometimes with the claims and conspiracies. But James Powell just wrote a paper. He's part of the Younger Dryas impact investigation. It's called Premature Rejection of Science, and he talks about how the skeptics of the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, which is now scientifically verified that there was a cataclysm that hit the Greenland ice sheet like 12,000 years ago. It's the event of the sinking of Plato's of Atlantis, if you will, that this cataclysm and world flood. So Powell says that he mentions the skeptics who took a run at him and other scientists at the time. They said that the Younger Dryas theory was the equivalent to pathological science, that it was just like UFOs and Bigfoot and ideas like that. And you could see the inherent bias in academia that there were these mythological ideas like a great flood or a cataclysm, just like the shit Velikovsky caught in the 60s. And eventually, if you can produce the evidence, you turn the tide, but you will meet tons of resistance, a premature rejection of hard science. And just like the Clovis barrier, that's another. Hugh, so many of us have been harping on this for years now, that people in the Americas much earlier. And now finally, there's incontrovertible proof with the footprints in New Mexico that go back 23,000 years, right? So that opens a new can of worms, So Hugh and I are not anti-science by any means. We work with a lot of professionals, but you have to understand there's inherent bias. It's just the human condition to be an infantile piece of shit. You know what I mean? It's just the way it is. And most people don't self-reflect and don't want to hear the other side of the argument.
So what y'all's, if you had to, place what do you think happened? Do you think, like, how prevalent are giants? Were they the Atlanteans? Were they the pre-Diluvian race that populated the world? Then a catastrophe came along, and then the smaller people were like still around. Like, I don't know. I also think that it's interesting that, look, before the Younger Dryas, you had sloths that were 20 feet, and you had like all your flora and your fauna was super big. So I always think that either the gravity was different or our atmosphere was something was different that was allowed for everything to be bigger. So that changed after, in my opinion, Younger Dryas. And then, so I don't know. So like, what's y'all's story? What happened?
Yeah. I'll give a short rendition of it, but that's a good point. The atmospheric conditions may have been different. There was megaflora, maybe megahumans. I'll give an Edgar Casey quote. He's the mystic who talked about giants in Atlantis and gave all kinds of readings. He said that giants and little people were part of the population of Atlantis. They were genetic, basically, that there was genetic engineers who created the human race that created giants and little people. So they're part of the population. We have giants and little people to some degree, but it's more of a pathological condition at this point. There are still people with 6 fingers and toes, and it's kind of like a genetic deformity rather than the trait of the giant anymore. So I think you have these populations die out. There were royal classes that interbred bloodlines. They died out. All the early explorers encountered giants from Patagonia to Virginia. Um, so I'll throw it over to Hugh, but it could be just they're part of a general population and they died out over time. Um, Hugh?
Yeah, no, yeah, but it's basically it. Yeah, but I think there were elite groups. I think that's one of the fundamental things that people kind of miss. I mean, start looking into the biblical traditions. They all came from the Watchers or the Anunnaki, depending on which tradition you're looking at. And so they were elites. They weren't just the general population. The same thing is somehow the elites of ancient Ireland, that they all came from these sunken lands that no one knows sure what they were or where they were. The same thing in North America. It's been proven, and we spoke to Ross Hamilton at length about this, who his mentor was Vine Deloria Jr., who wrote the brilliant book Red Earth, White Lies, and that became one of our source books, one of our big inspirations for Giants on Record. Because also in there, he spoke to many elders who were very old at the time, back in the 60s and 70s, and he was picking up information from them and these stories. And it's been pretty much proven now that many of proper oral traditions actually were histories as well. They weren't just stories, they were actually histories encoded within stories, encoded within these very accurate renditions that are passed down word for word, syllable to syllable, precisely, and memorized over and over again. And they found stories that they believe went back to the time of the Younger Dryas. So we're talking 12,000-13,000 years ago, where they called it, in some traditions they called it the dark tent, where the whole sky became dark. All the megafauna started dying out. And they talk about the giant humans dying out at the same time, because before that, there was a time, and there's one of the traditions, I forget exactly where it was from, where they talk about these giant beavers that humans had to hunt for food. There was also a time when the giants would herd mammoths like we herd cattle and things like this. And these were part of these traditions, and they went back to before the time of the Younger Dryas. And there's even a memory of that happening and the devastation that caused. And they said that everything shrunk, everything got smaller and smaller after that period. So it's in the oral tradition, it's in the kind of traditional stories that are being passed down, but it's also maybe, I think in our Giants on Record, we actually talk about this extra amount of carbon dioxide, like 0.5% more, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Jim. It's 0.5% more of carbon dioxide they think was in the atmosphere before the cataclysm, and that alone would trigger all your glands, your hypothalamus gland, and other things, and you would actually naturally grow taller because you're taking in more different things. And the same thing with the plants and the megafauna. So there is something to be said about that. And I think there's more research needs to be done, but it's not, no one, is that interested in it, to be honest with you, even though there are some academic papers that we spotted and we used in our first book.
It's just crazy because that's not really that long ago. Like in the scheme of things, 10,000 years isn't really that long ago. So you would think, like if there's, what is that, 30 generations ago? Or if you have 3 generations, 100 years, no, sorry, that's more than that. Anyway, yeah, but still, it's not that long ago. I'm like, okay.
No, it's not. No, it's not that long ago. That's the thing. But even in Britain, for instance, even North America, everywhere. It's like we don't have like memories of a few hundred years ago. Really, it's just not there. All the Mayans were kind of wiped out, all their books burnt, so you're losing all that knowledge. You've got the Library of Alexandria going up in flames and things like this, and that's only a couple of thousand years ago. And so you've got these zealots, these idiots, these kind of religious types, kind of just pretty much destroying everything because it doesn't fit with their kind of paradigm at the time. So it's unfortunate, but this is why I believe very strongly in the oral traditions, when things are given to memory, memory. I mean, the Druids, for instance, had phenomenal memory techniques, and it's the same principle as the Native Americans. It's the same principle as most indigenous cultures, and that is where we've gleaned a lot of our information from.
Yeah, I grew up in New Mexico. I grew up in like next to Isleta Pueblo. Like so I went to elementary school with those kids and stuff, and we'd always have storytellers come to talk to us as a little kid, and they would say that you can't rely on writing because it might not always be there. And they said that people like it's subjected to age and like entropy and to people destroying it, but they had to like part of their rite of passage is they had to memorize word for word what was told to them. And I always thought that that was a super cool, like, and storytellers were revered in their tribes, like that was like an aspiration to get to. So I think that's
Absolutely. It's the most important information to these people, and there's only a limited amount of information you can transmit.
yeah.
And why would you ever throw in erroneous information? And all around the country, all around the United States, the elder, we've talked to a lot of legit elders, you and I, and Vine Deloria, the Native American elder. He also chronicled what was said, and it's remarkable. They have the same stories everywhere, and you have uh, not just six fingers and six toes with giant hands and feet etched everywhere in the United States. You have legends of the slant-eyed giants and the Judicolor Rock, and then over the British Isles you have what is it, B.F. Spooner in Wales. There is an account where there was a live giant person like in the 1700s. It's in the book, and he has six fingers and six toes, and on and on and on. The giants in Cornwall, there's a name for them, Tren O or whatever. So they have six fingers and six toes as well. The moral of the story is that these oral traditions and religious documents are just portraying this ubiquitous story that is strange and specific and found everywhere. Isolated Pacific Islands, huge Kiribati, there's like huge carved or imprinted footprints with six toes. And the old men in the 40s, the shamans told I.G. Turbot, the anthropologist, that it's from the giants, from the race of giants who lived there, and that's an isolated Pacific Island that had no contact with anyone. On and on and on. So there's a story here, and it's utterly fascinating. It's somewhat frustrating, but I'm just absolutely enthralled with it. I just I think we're onto something, and let science unfold. But it's really a fascinating story.
Do you guys think they're completely gone? Like, do you think there's okay, you're gonna hate this question, but do you think there's a Bigfoot connection? Like, do you think there's like I don't know, like yeah.
Yeah, I
You
do.
can go.
That's one of my little kind of side fascinations. I'm absolutely fascinated by Bigfoot. My buddy David Hatcher Childress, he's really into Bigfoot. So I'm always, whenever I see him, we talk about Bigfoot. But even in Britain, that there are traditions. There's a tradition of can you remember the name of that? There's a place in Wales where there's a tradition of this giant hairy man, roaming the mountains and scaring people. We've got the big grey man of Ben McDewey.
Ben McDewey, yeah.
Up in Scotland as well, who's got this supernatural element to it, but they think he was a kind of Sasquatch Bigfoot type creature. And there's various other accounts like that here. I mean, there's in North America, obviously that's like Bigfoot country, Canada and things like that. I mean, there's actually a couple of accounts. Jim hates me for this one. But there's an account we found in Ohio. What was the place? And I think maybe Dayton, Ohio, or somewhere. They were digging up these crossroads, putting in these traffic lights or something, and they found this really weird, really tall, odd skeleton that had kind of really big skull, sort of almost like Neanderthal type skull. He had really long lower arms and like big hands, and it was like, what the hell? It's a really odd looking person, and it caused a lot of confusion. And I think we actually put it in our first book, and then I was convinced, because he was found in this gravel pit. That's where they found it. That's a Bigfoot skeleton, but it had been buried. It had been like a burial. It wasn't just thrown in there. So I created this theory based on one account that Bigfoots are buried under gravel.
Idiot.
but you do get that. I mean, some of these skeletons that are being reported could be that, because some of the reports, the people who've kind of witnessed them over the last few hundred, potentially 1,000 years, because they go way into Native American records as well, that they could be, they're so humanoid that it's difficult to, when you're describing them a few hundred years ago, when you're digging them up, It could be,
Yeah,
it could be like, it could be Bigfoot, it could be Sasquatch.
you
Yeah,
get
I
this,
mean,
this,
you know,
yeah.
there. Sorry.
Go on.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you get the Solomon Island story. I think we're going to do an interview with L.A. Marzulli at some point, and I think he interviewed one of the guys from the Kandahar, Afghanistan story.
Oh,
I'm, I'm not going to claim this and that, but I am open to the strangest of possibilities. There is some like other dimension interfacing with ours, or multiverse. I don't know what the hell it is, but I'm open to the idea because there's so much uh, bizarre phenomena that occurs consistently throughout history. It's not just our modern civilization that chronicles it. It happens, and I'll go anywhere for a good story. And I do ayahuasca ceremonies, and I sit with shamans and wisdom keepers, and yeah. So I'm down for. I'm open to any of these ideas. I really think that this universe is quite strange, quite frankly.
yeah. I like go to portals, places, kind of thing. Like I seek that out, and then I had this Tibetan lama, or it wasn't. He's not a shaman. Like, what is he? Not really a monk, but I
Love
can't.
saying Rampa.
Maybe he said the word, but I don't know. Forgive me, sorry to John Dennis that I can't remember what it is you are. But he was on a couple of my episodes ago, and he was
cool.
talking about the concept of Shambhala and Agartha. Like, they were really interested in that, and he was saying that it's a dimension that, like, it's literally like a spheres that, like, almost like the flower of life, like how they touch, and at certain times when they go into each other, they touch, we can access them, but we can't always access them. And I started visualizing that a lot lately, and I was like, yeah, I do definitely think there's something to there's more to our reality than meets our senses. And so yeah, and I know a ton of people who have seen, oh, not a ton, but I know 3 people, including my brother, who have seen Bigfoot. So like, there's just so many accounts, and it's not like there's an official reporting. Like, the people that have told me stuff, they haven't reported that to anybody. Like, imagine how many it really goes. It's crazy, and then yet we haven't been able to find them. So they're obviously quite intelligent or interdimensional or something.
There's a brilliant author called Patrick Harper, and he's written this book called Daemonic Reality, not demonic, daemonic, like, so you're talking daemons, which are these kind of, it's like this thing you're talking about. It's like Bigfoots are included in that. You've got like UFOs, crop circles, fairy realm, elementals, all this kind of stuff. And there's this, and the giants are actually part of that. And so there's this thing where you kind of keep searching and trying to, and almost getting to the point where you discovered Bigfoot or giants or UFOs, and then another level of complexity will unfold before you, and it's almost like you've got to start again, because it just stays one step ahead, just out of sight. You just about grasp the what you think is the reality of these situations, and it takes one step out of place. And I mean, lots of these giant stories and giant accounts, I mean, I've got links with like strange lights, the fairy realm. I mean, even like the Tuatha De Danann in Ireland, they're linked to the fairy realm. They were said to, when they eventually got defeated, they actually retreated into the mounds, into like Newgrange and sites like this, and started living within them, and would only come out at certain times of year and things like this. So there's definitely a connection there between this. And I think the ancients had this, they didn't have any distraction, they didn't have any like internet, TV, no books, even nothing. They were just looking at the night sky, they were observing what they were feeling and seeing within the landscape and the night sky, and probably noticing these eminences of energy and balls of light moving across, and would build their sites there because they felt something, some energy happen, la-di-da. And so you get this kind of thing where they could actually tap into this other world. They could actually kind of get taken by it, like people say, you get taken by the fairies, and they didn't have the distraction. Their minds must have been so clear and so kind of meditative that we just don't have that anymore, but we've lost touch with that. And I think that's how they were able to kind of choose the locations of these sites, because they were kind of, they were places like liminal places where they were just like sacred areas, and like they would sense it and see it. And often these balls of light, to them, they would be like fairies, they'd be elementals, and stories would be created about that. And so there's a whole other thing going on. I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg, really.
Can I jump in for a sec? It reminds me of John Michel was, Hugh studied with him. He's the original megalithomaniac, but he talks about a concept in the British Isles of enchanting the landscape. And we talk about it in our book. We have Stonehenge and all these sites in Avebury and Glastonbury Tor, and things are aligned by virtue of a geometric science that was brought over by the gods and the giants. And it basically attuned the landscape, enchanted the landscape for peace and prosperity, as tools of enlightenment to help with consciousness raising. And I feel like there's places around the planet, like the Hitchin Post of the Sun, the shaman I did a ceremony with told me his ancestors built it, and you go there, and it's basically it amplifies your thoughts. So say your prayers or your thoughts there, and they will be amplified because of the choice of the stone, the orientation, the geomantic properties and ley lines and earth energies. And I really feel like, especially in the British Isles, that you probably had access to these realms much more. In our society is so dense and backwards and like tech obsessed, we've lost that connection because organized religion doesn't have that connection. It's a fear-based disconnection from the one or the divine. And these people and the druids and these ancient ones built structures just like the King's Pyramid and the King's Chamber and the Great Pyramid to open you up to connect with something. So that might be a reason why there's not as much as this phenomena occurring, because this, passageway to the other realms is, because Stonehenge is kind of like decommissioned at this point. If it's not the structure it once was. So thanks for letting me ramble there.
I like that. Well, and that's, I mean, like you guys have hit on, like, I've seen fairies, I've seen a gnome, I've seen a unicorn, I've done ayahuasca, I've done my ego deaths and my mushroom things, I've gone to all these portals. I'm like totally into this stuff. Like, so I'm like going like, oh my God, I'm like totally having like an internal geek out right now. But yeah, so in one of my ayahuasca journeys, I did see like the grid system. Like I could see like the line, like everything I was looking at, I could see how everything was gridded together, like the whole earth, like how the fabric of our reality was like in a interconnected like spider web. So that's neither here nor there. But okay, let's go into, so that's cool. Like I like that you guys are into that stuff.
Wicked cool.
Look, can I say one thing to that, because it's something I've been looking into, and it's like it's just naturally I've been researching this because I'm very interested in this kind of stuff as well, and experiment and so forth. But there's one aspect of, like, the further you go back, like if you're looking at the building of ancient sites, like Göbekli Tepe is the obvious one, Karahan Tepe, all these kind of sites, and you go back even to Paleolithic times. I mean, Graham Hancock's talked about this a lot, but there's so much evidence that they were taking and utilizing psychotropic plants everywhere, to such a level that that's what triggered everything to be constructed in the first place, in my opinion. That's where my research is kind of keeps falling back into the Terence McKenna world. That's what it's all about. When you look at like Göbekli Tepe, it's so abstract, so strange, and then you do a little bit of research and you find out that they started brewing beer and wine at Göbekli Tepe. The first places they ever did it was in this area. And if you're brewing with barley, for instance, you are going to get ergo, which is like if you get a certain type of ergo, certain types can kill you, but other types of what LSD was synthesized from. So you're brewing beer for your whole group. You kind of parties at Göbekli Tepe or get together ceremonies and so forth. And a bit of ergo gets into it, and it ferments a bit wrong. Suddenly you're all tripping out super hard, and like you can imagine where the ideas and the abstract design may have come from. We must also remember there's certain types of cattle that were around that area, the whole Garden of Eden, Fertile Crescent area. Their dung is what psilocybin mushrooms grow on. It's a specific type of bovine or cow. We also have all the grasses that grew in that area contain trace amounts of DMT as well. So you got these three things as examples of what was going on, and then you have all these traditions of Soma and other such things, and the Shining Ones, and all this kind of stuff, that they were all on this stuff. And I think this is so often overlooked, even though it's been covered very carefully by Graham Hancock and Terence McKenna and others. There's something to be said about that the way things have even got to where we are today. But certainly the whole megalithic expansion, I think, was partly inspired by that.
Yeah,
Yes, yes.
but we're dealing with like a weird society in that, like, you know, like I didn't do, I accidentally did 12 grams of mushrooms when I was 35 years old, and I thought I was just gonna, I didn't realize you weren't supposed to eat the whole bag. So I just, that was my first time. Hi. Yeah, and so I just thought I was gonna see pretty colors kind of thing, but like, I mean, my sister was like, "You're a druggie." Now, like, I mean, there we
Oh,
have such an unhealthy relationship with anything that, and it's, and like, I'm just trying to say, like, I'm not, I've never done meth, you know, I've never done, like, I'm not into hardcore drugs. I don't do psychedelics all the time, but I just think that it's like this, we have such an unhealthy relationship as a society with anything that isn't material reductionism. And so it's really hard to talk to a lot of people about a lot of this stuff because it's just, you know, you get attacked lambast from every which side.
absolutely. Can I jump in for a sec? No, no, it's always they've always been viewed in a puritanical fashion. But the Hugh's talking about ergot. Kykeon was used at the Eleusinian Mysteries in Greece. I did a whole talk at Megalithomania, or I'm sorry, at the Origins Conference in London about psychedelics in the ancient world. All of these churches in England, it's Amanita muscaria and psilocybin everywhere. Basically Christianity was um, a mushroom cult when it started out, when it was more Gnostic based or truth based, and then it turned into the freak show that it is today. But you have so many studies by Johns Hopkins and others about the efficacy, and now there's a bunch of companies that are taking ibogaine, DMT, um, ketamine, psilocybin, and it's going to be a new wave of unbelievable mental health drugs. So people will shut the fuck up eventually. But people who are in a cult like religion are just not interested in opening their mind, which is fine. You know, that's just the way it is. I feel like ancient mysteries should be an avenue to expand your consciousness, ask questions, figure out what the hell you're doing in time and space, look at what the ancients were doing, look at the shamanic cultures, and use it as a tool to expand your consciousness. Even the visiting of sites like the Great Pyramid and other places, it was built to raise your consciousness. So you're like, whoa, you go in there and you see like multiple lifetimes and different masters, and that, it has that effect. So the moral of the story is, like, if I were to give advice to anyone, is don't use ancient mysteries to get into the whacked out conspiracy world of like QAnon and stuff and be in your mother's basement. Use it as a tool to awaken yourself, be a better person, self-reflect on your shortcomings, and look at what the ancients were up to. That's my take.
I love that. So I would be amiss if I didn't go ahead and talk to you guys about like what do you think about the fact that there's like nubs that are found globally, or you have scrape marks, scoop marks, beveled blocks, like you have just some of these weird features that are found on all these megaliths. Like, do you see the connection like globally or not?
I'm going first here, Jim. Okay, slow down, calm down. All right. Yeah, one thing as well with that is that I made this video. It's on YouTube. Just I put it out a couple of weeks ago, actually. Stonehenge is an interesting example. People don't realize this, where you find, actually, I believe there's a nub in
I
Stonehenge. I
heard you
think
talk
there's,
about that. Super
yeah,
awesome.
there's scoop marks on 2 or 3 of the stones there, which are clearly, they do not look like they've been carved out of hard stone. They look like they've been softened. Yeah. There's also other features there, like little strange sort of spiral shapes on one of the stones. It looks like it's got the big face on it. I can send you some images of these. It's in the video. I'll send you the link. But that I found that I've always been confused by that. And there's also Stanton Drew, which appears to be, it's like a triple stone circle in Somerset, which is supposedly made of this conglomerate. So it almost looks like gravel, concrete kind of put together. And then we came across this book called A Fool's Bolt Soon Shot at Stonehenge by Reverend Robert Gay. It was written in 1966, Somerset-based kind of vicar type dude, but he was also an anarchist, and he tried to burn down the latest the local member of Parliament's place. He went to jail for it. I think that's a legendary person. But he wrote this book anyway, and it was like a sarcastic look at Stonehenge because of all this stuff coming out of Stonehenge. He wanted to put the record straight. And in it, he talks about these giants who were said to have built Stonehenge, but they were called the Kangic giants or the Kangi. loads of their bones and skulls found all over the West Country. But one of the things he says in it, I'm getting to my point, I promise, was that they had this technology, and this was written in 1666, yeah. They had this technology, but they were able to soften the stone, turn it to powder, and then reform it back into the shapes they wanted. And they would scoop it and change it until it looked exactly how they wanted it. So this was written about this, and it was probably a really ancient tradition that he got caught up with in 1666 and put it out there. And you look at the descriptions of Joseph Davidovich and like the whole Geopolymer Institute and all this kind of stuff, it's the same principles. And so I find that really intriguing, that a tribe of giants was said to have built Stonehenge and Stanton Drew. You can actually see what looks like scoop marks in the sites they're actually kind of written about. So to me, that's fascinating. But again, obviously, you know, you can, if you can compare it to Aswan Quarry, you can compare it to Machu Picchu or Sacsayhuamán or Ollantaytambo in Peru. There's a few other places that have it in different parts of the world. And this is just the scoop marks I'm talking about here. It's really, really odd. So I think, you know, it's one element of this completely missing kind of aspect of ancient technology that we haven't really got our heads around in this era.
Yeah, I'll say, well, one thing I like to address is racist claims get thrown around a lot against alternative researchers,
Oh
you
yeah.
know, which is garbage. It's like the Tuatha De Danann are the ones who are proclaimed to have built Newgrange, right? All the sites around the British Isles are attributed to the gods and the giants who showed up, just like in Egypt and Viracocha in Peru, the Huaris and the giants in the Viracochas. They specifically told, the Inca did, at Sacsayhuaman and Cusco and down at Pumapunku and Tiwanaku, they specifically stated, and it's noted by the chroniclers of the Spanish, that the giants and the shining ones and the Viracochas built it. Our ancestors didn't. So it's not like a racist idea to take out, to diminish the accomplishments of these cultures. We're just saying, in ancient times, who showed up all around the world, these shining ones, these teachers. That's why the idea of like a unified thought system is interesting. Or what, I'm a stonemason with engineering experience, and I see the same thing. I'm like, it almost looks like the stone is melted, and you have knobs, and you have super tight seams, and the pyramid, the middle pyramid with the granite casing, I think Menkuri's, has the same stones, same fit, same pillowing, same knobs that you find all around Ollantaytambo and other sites. So, you know, you can't just say, oh, that's case closed, because you need the dates that go back 10,000 years. But now we have dates like that at Göbekli Tepe, and it will take time because if you told a scientist or anthropologist, there was like a roaming band of shining ones and gods around the earth in 12,000 BC, they're going to be like, there's not a lot of evidence for diffusionary contact, you know, this, that, there'll be a lot of questions in the way, you know, just like, I'm not anti-evolution by any means. You can see natural evolution occurring, but a Homo sapiens, the side effects of genetic engineering. All the gods create humans out of clay and genetic material, whether it's the Anunnaki or in the Bible or Viracocha or Fuxi and Nuwa in China, on and on and on. That's what the tradition state of these people everywhere. So it's pretty specific, and I'm open to the idea. And to prove the case, I'll just say the scan team has increased their experiments on the Great Pyramid, and they're going to increase the. I'm sorry. There's muon detectors that we use that found a void in the Great Pyramid of Giza a couple of years ago. Now the scientific team is building equipment that's going to be 100 times stronger, and they're going to be able to tell if there's in that void, if there's information and structures in there. So you need evidence that shows artifacts and contemporaneous with like a 10,000-year-old date, carbon dating, things like that. So I get a little skepticism, but the ideas that we're all talking about, I think, make a lot of sense.
Cool. All right, you guys. What? Okay, so this one's kind of a big one, but like, what do you guys really think's going on here? Like, what do you think's like? Like now that you have all these giant information, you have this you're kind of putting like all these puzzle pieces together. Like, how do you think that relates to what's going on here? Like, what's going on with our reality? What's going on? Is any of this related to our current control system? Like, do you think that we're about to go through another Kali Yuga kind of thing? Like, what's your sense of what to do about having information and consciousness expansion of this?
Yep. You want to go first too, or what?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I can't. No,
Yeah.
no, because I can always go first. I'm always.
Look, yeah, I mean, I think you look at there's quite a lot of problems like to do with like these sites. There's two things that kind of bug me. Some people say this is the John Michelle thing. Jim mentioned it earlier. The whole enchantment of the landscape. It was all delightful energy for fertility, to raise consciousness. It was to like help with the plant growth. And to maintain high and code information like geometric knowledge and things like this. But other people have said, that actually they were built by like the dark elite to control people and to control things. Like the modern world is sort of being pushed into with this sort of darkness being forced all over it with all these different things. So which way is it? Were the pyramids actually like to control people? Were they like, and were they built by slaves? Were they controlling people then? So you got these two different sides to this whole thing, which always fascinates me. And you look at these giants. I mean, we were talking before the show about this book of Og. This guy was just
Crazy.
insane. He was like, proper intense. Wanted to kill everyone and eat everyone and things like that. And chop things up, and it's like it's pretty dark. And he was one of the giants, apparently, one of the descendants of these great people who came from Mount Hermon, the Watchers, and eventually the Nephilim and their descendants, the Canaanites, and so forth. And so, yeah, it's really strange trying to get your head around it, because you're dealing with, number one, a history that's been deleted in many parts of the world. So you're sort of grasping for little bits of information, trying to work things out. And you're not sure if you're right. You just don't know if you're right. But like Jim and I do, we just follow the trail. We just keep our minds open. We keep reading, we keep researching. We see little things pop up. And little insights occur out of nowhere. Even dreams, I've had dreams with ideas have popped up in dreams and things like this. But where if it's leading us anywhere, I don't know. I think we're pretty doomed the way the world's going. But I've got this sort of a little bit of tiny little spark of hope in my heart. But let's see.
Can it be that all the mythologies, the complex mythologies all around the world, in Egypt, the building text, the pyramid text, the Sumerian freak show story of sci-fi, genetic engineering, on and on and on, can they all be conjured and have no truth? You get into Greek mythology and everything else. Of course not. It's like, what a mistake to ignore the written and oral traditions all around the world of indigenous people who actually lived through the events they describe. And they describe very strange things. And they describe beings who were genetic engineers who came and created humans and hybrids and giants. And I don't have a time machine, nobody does, but that is what is specifically stated. You have hybrid beings all over the walls of Sumerian temples in Egypt and Mexico. And it's just a reality that is like the Dogon people in Mali, Africa. They talk about the Nomo showing up, these kind of amphibious androgynous gods, and you find the same gods everywhere. Yeah, Vieira is androgynous. Fuxi is androgynous in China. Oannes, the weird fish guy with the man bag, he's androgynous, like a double sex being. On and on and on. All the mystics, Edgar Cayce, Rudolf Steiner, Blavatsky, the Rosicrucians, the Freemasons, they all say Atlantis existed, genetic engineering existed. They were like dark elites. There were, the beings of light. Tolkien got all his information from studying that mythology. He talked about the greatest fascination of his life was the idea of Atlantis. You have the dark forces at work. You have the daughters and sons of light. And I just say that there was a strange story there, and it's playing out in a kind of reincarnated fashion in our current society, clearly. But I'm a non-dualist. I study Ramana Maharshi, the Course in Miracles, all the kind of non-dualist masters throughout history. So I would say the universe of time and space is like an acid trip. It's a total freak show. don't get too high, don't get too low, meditate, turn within, like watch Ramana Maharshi videos, for instance, and listen to what a real master says, like Buddha or Jesus or Lao Tzu. And they say that, the peace comes with turning within, and that the mind is holographic, and don't judge the world and hate the world because you holographically send the message to the self, because there's only one global mind or universal mind. So that'd be my quick way of saying that things can look dark and fucked up, but then you'll have a realm of light. And just know that this is like a virtual reality, temporary movie character that you're inhabiting, and don't overvalue your current incarnation so much. Don't take it so seriously. That's my take.
I love that. Thank you so much. That's super cool. So, okay, guys, this is so awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Do you have anything? Was there anything that I didn't really touch on that you guys were kind of feeling like talking about real quick?
There's well, this is one thing I think we did touch on it, but I want to just mention it because one of the things that is to do with the oral traditions. I just want to mention this because what we found, because I'm fascinated by, like you say, I've written this book about earth grids and ley lines and earth energies and all this kind of stuff, and lots of these giant myths have that information encoded within them, a huge amount. And so what I found, and what we found while we've been researching this book, is that we found stories of the giants and how they built the sites, how they laid out the sites, what placed them in the landscape. They were throwing stones in triangles across the landscape from mountaintops, these giant kings. They were master magicians and all these kind of things. So I think that's one of the elements that kind of we wanted to mention, because we focus on that in the book. We go into that in like huge detail, actually, because it's completely overlooked. People don't realize that all this earth mysteries is really cool. All these different subjects that form into this geomancy are written about, talked about. They're part of oral traditions, and they've been passed down from generation to generation. And this information is really important today, because we've lost this. We don't have this way of thinking when we're building cities, when we're building roads and things like that. In the Far East, they have what's called feng shui, and it's a tradition that's still maintained even in architectural schools and things like this. Whereas here we don't have that, and so you're messing up. In these traditions, they were terraforming the land. They were shaping the landscape to make it harmonious and whole, and to be healthy and vibrant to live in. And today we're destroying that. So we're living in this, where all the energies are jutting against each other. There's what's called geopathic stress everywhere. And so I work with a whole bunch of geomants. I know, there's a whole team of them I kind of know. So we're always trying to kind of work out, and we sometimes have to go to places and kind of fix the energies there a little bit, by little techniques and things like that. I think that's one of the things people should be aware of. It's like, if you're feeling like crappy, it could often be because the energies are messed up, because they built things the wrong way. And you can find spots in the landscape, find little pockets of areas where you can kind of get away from that. And I think that's something we need to bring back into culture. That's my little
I don't like square corners. I like rounded stuff, but like there's not really a ton of options in our society for not getting away from square corners right now. But real quick, Hugh, what's your elevator pitch for crop circles? Because I know you're kind of like got a thing for that, and and that could be like a whole thing, but like that's a huge geek out like thing that I'm obsessed with. I think crop circles are fairies, but go ahead.
Well, I mean, I could go on about this. I mean, I've done like a 2-hour lecture on this, for God's sake, like contact in the desert a couple of years. But there's an ancient tradition of crop circles as well. People don't realize this is all linked to the elemental stuff we talked about earlier. Even the giants are linked with this as well. The giant kind of fairies you get, because often these fairies aren't little sprites with little wings. They're like vicious kind of 8-foot tall beasts coming after you and trying to take your soul and things like that. So, but with the crop circles, there are reports of them going back hundreds of years, possibly thousands. And the balls of light that are seen with them often form them and create them. You have this tradition of fairy rings, you have will-o'-the-wisp, you have sprites, you have all these different names given to them in different parts of the British Isles, for instance, and there's a prehistory of them. I mean, that's what people don't realize. They're not all modern. They're not just the last 20 years or so. They've been around for a very, very long time, and this is linked with this elemental realm very closely, I think. And then you come up to the modern times, and unfortunately, many of them are man-made. It's almost like, and the people who make them don't say who they are, and so there's this, some people think they're trying to deceive people, but I think there's another side to it where they're continuing a tradition quietly, secretly, a bit like Banksy but in the fields. There's like this kind of like creating this art, and I think, whatever you make of modern crop circles, people claim they're hoaxes and not worth looking at. They are, because you're being taken out into the land, you're being taken out into parts of the landscape you're never going to ever walk into in your life, because it's a farmer's field, it's on private land and things like this. And often these people who make them are really into geomancy, they're really into ley lines and earth energies, and they want to place it on a very powerful spot, even if humans are making them. Some of them, we don't know who makes them, even to the present day, so there's still this mystery about them. Obviously they're connected with the whole UFO phenomenon.
Can you tell? Can you be like, yeah, this is real, this one's man-made?
Well, there's a few. A long time ago when I first got into it in the late 90s, I started getting into it. There's a lot of mysteries then. It's got less and less since then, because I know who makes them. I literally know the people, some of them, so it's a bit annoying. And so you get tip-offs of where they are, so I can get my drone out of there to fly over them. But I think whatever's going on, they're continuing a tradition, even if they're not being made. But there are some made in the middle of nowhere, miles from anywhere. You get them all over North America. I mean, they go back like 80 years of reports in North America, so you can't claim people are going out hoaxing them there. And so I think there's and they're always linked, in Britain at least, they're always close or aligned to megalithic sites and earthworks and burial mounds and things like this. And so one of the ideas is that these stones, this gets a bit esoteric here, that the stones, the crystalline nature of the stone circles, are actually we like given information by the builders to be released at a future date, and that information is being picked up through these earth energies and creating these circles. So that's one of the ideas. If you sort of discount the idea of time, they were kind of moving, they didn't sort of see it like that. It's very odd. I mean, it's a very strange, that's what got me into all this stuff, to be honest with you. It was because of the crop circles I discovered all the megaliths and all things like that. Now I've become a bit more sensible, talking about giants, for instance, things haven't changed that much.
So, what's y'all's 2022 looking like? Like, what's your, you guys? Yeah.
Yeah, we're both on Shatner's show. William Shatner's The Unexplained. We haven't. My brother and I were going to do a third Roanoke special for the History Channel. Then the plague hit, so I haven't done any. We did a series of shows for history. Hugh was on Search for the Lost Giants. We've both been on Ancient Aliens, and Hugh has a site, megalithomania.co.uk, and there's a ton of videos from me and Hugh there. Both our books, Giants on Record and Giants of Stonehenge in Ancient Britain, are on Amazon. They both, read the reviews, I guess. I don't want to talk our game up, but they get high praise from a lot of Ancient Mysteries people. And I'm doing some conferences and doing like a Phenomicon and out in Utah in a couple months, and Hugh's doing like with Giorgio and Eric Von Daniken. I'll let him say that. But we're always busy taking tours, and the best way to get in touch with us and what we're doing is through the Megalithomania site. And I would say, going out the door, use your investigation of ancient mysteries to, like, for me, it's been helpful, like, admit when you're wrong, self-reflect, look at both sides of an argument, and use it to, like, elevate your consciousness and to be a better person, frankly. Not to be like, if you notice, there's so many, and I've been through conspiracies. I don't want to be a hypocrite, but they're so bitter and twisted and dark and like hopeless. You know what I mean? And I was like that. People would be like, "What the fuck is wrong with you?" And I'd be, "No, you don't understand. This is going on right now." And it's just like, that shit's going to go on anyways, and nobody's going to listen to what the hell you're saying. It's like, turn within or act kindly to people. There are ways to mitigate the freak show of the world that have to do with like kindness and self-reflection. And that's what I would use the platform of Ancient Mysteries for, not just to be a freak, in your mother's basement once again. So That's my take.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'll add to that. Yeah, what am I up to? Yeah, similar to Jim, we're working on doing more writing on various subjects, but I've got the big Megalithomania conference I run every year in May, 7th and 8th of May. We're doing it in Glastonbury, England. We're going to be live streaming it actually this year. That's coming up in a month, or so from now. I don't know when this is coming out exactly. And then I think I'm running a few tours. I'll be doing an England tour with Private Stonehenge. We do Orkney in August. We're doing a big Beckley Tepe tour with Andrew Collins in September, and we go to Egypt most years. Jim joins us in Egypt. He's going to join us on some other tours going over into the next year. And what else am I up to? Yeah, I should mention the fact that I'm speaking at this big Chariots of the Gods Awakening 2022. It's called in Blackpool, England, on the 24th to the 26th of June. They've asked me to mention this anywhere I can because there's like a bunch of people from Gaia TV and Ancient Aliens, Giorgio, and Eric von Daniken, and a whole bunch. Andrew Collins is going to be there. That's going to be quite a lot of fun if you want to come to the northern realms of England, that is. And I think it's going to be live streamed as well, some of it. And what else am I up to? Yeah, there's a few other bits and bobs, a few other TV spots here and there. Yeah, it's all on megalithomania.co.uk.
Great. Thank you guys so much. It's been a pleasure, and we'll have to talk again sometime soon.
Cool. Yeah, it's been fun. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Wonderful interview.